Hey, welcome to Maxwell 3000 Productions. I am Maxwell 3000. I am honored to again have with me my brother, uh, my friend, fellow cultural connoisseur, and owner of operator of Dixon Fence Company, 423-999-1390. Tommy Dixon, how are you, sir?
Doing good today, brother. How are you?
Good. If I had the special effects, I'd have all the clapping in there. Ah.
One of these days.
Yeah, something like that, something like that. Well, we're here again, and we just really wanted to come out and do a continuation of this book club thing. This is something that I think we've both been enjoying. We've been doing this for what, 6 months now?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think we're kind of digging, getting together through this medium and even on this platform, and just really kind of, I'm excited to really kind of share this with everybody.
Yeah, same here.
All right. Well, let's get right into it. So we have kind of chosen to continue on with a review of Charles Bukowski and reading Factotum. Uh, Tommy, tell the people a little bit about Charles Bukowski real quick, and we're not going to go real in depth on his background because if you want to know more about Charles Bukowski, you can look at our previous podcast.
So Bukowski is a German-born contemporary American author. He grew up in the Depression era, known as the poet laureate of the American lowlife. He had very little success early on, but later in his career, he actually got several works published and experienced some success as far as his writing career.
Yeah. And so with what we read before was Ham on Rye, that introduced us to this Henry Chinaski. And when I say introduced us, it really introduced us in a chronological order, not really how the books were written, right? To make a correction from our last episode, Post Office, which was Bukowski's first novel and the first in the Henry Chinaski saga, was actually published in 1971, not 1969, the same year that he got his publishing deal. But what we did this time was Factotum, which is the second book chronologically, and also the second book that was published. And I believe it was actually published in 1975. Um, so, what did you think about kind of this continuing on of Henry Chinaski's life?
Well, he's an interesting character. That's for sure. Almost seems like at times it's a guide of what not to do is something I took away from this book in particular, more so than the previous one.
Yeah, yeah, and I can see that. And the last book kind of being his coming of age, I guess, right? And I
Right.
think you and I even made that comparison to maybe Jack Kerouac's first novel. Um, and if you make that comparison with Ham on Rye, you can kind of say that Factotum might be his On the Road. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that. He does a lot of traveling back and forth around the country and gets different experiences in different cities and ultimately just spends a lot of time trying to have a good time. It's
Yeah,
similar to On the Road.
yeah, yeah. Um, and so a lot of it is that travel, and what we in this book we see Chinaski kind of traversing back and forth across the country, and him kind of focusing, trying to focus on writing, and almost doing these things to have inspiration for his writing. But we really just find him getting a low end apartment, finding the nearest source of alcohol, whether it be a bar or a liquor store, and getting some kind of job that he doesn't really care about until something goes wrong and he moves on.
Right. He seems to feel like people who actually cared about their job are kind of suckers in his eyes. He doesn't see the point in it at all. He's really just trying to fund his alcoholism at this point in his lifetime.
Yeah. And so starts off in New Orleans, and it's just like we said. He find him in a bus station, and he finds the lowest end, lowest cost boarding house, and we really just see that pattern over and over from city to city. He does come back early on in the book to his parents' house, which is just destructive, right?
Know anything about the first book that we reviewed this way? It was always tumultuous, abusive relationship between him and his father in particular. His mother greets him with open arms when he shows back up, although it seems like she almost doesn't recognize him. And first thing his father lets him know is you'll be paying rent, laundry, groceries, all that kind of stuff. So continuing the same type of relationship that they had throughout his childhood.
Yeah, and can't really stay there long. And he falls right back into that sexual deviance that we saw in Ham on Rye, where he's really just hanging around the house, peeping at his neighbors, getting drunk, getting arrested.
Yeah.
There's one scene where he and his pops get in a fight when he's brought home late at night or early in the morning by the L.A. police. Um, and that kind of climaxes with him going to jail, hanging around with an old city college buddy. His pops come bail him out, and he kind of on the way home says, "Hey, this is going to be added to your bill," you know. And so got too expensive to live at home, so he went on down the road, right?
Right. And on the one hand, it seemed like his dad's pretty tough, and on the other hand, it's like Henry at this point is kind of a pervert, and you could almost call him a degenerate in a lot of ways. So it's his father's frustration is understandable to an extent, but probably doesn't handle it as gracefully as he maybe should.
Yeah, and when you talk about him being a degenerate, you said earlier about his mother maybe not recognizing him a little bit, and this guy does not have good hygienic practices. Like that's almost a theme throughout the book, or at least through the beginning half of the book, right? And he doesn't shave, doesn't wear clean clothes, probably smells like alcohol, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah. Hygiene's rough, and it makes me laugh when I think about how they detailed it in the book because it's pretty disgusting stuff as far as that goes.
yeah, yeah. And I think that is Bukowski kind of dealing with that freedom of expression and that shock value in your face type of art. Maybe I'm giving them too much. I don't know.
He's
Um,
pushing the boundaries of censorship, I say, in his writing at this point in time in America, especially.
100%, 100%. Um, so it's something we kind of failed to mention, and kind of left it out there for folks just to have some previous knowledge of Ham on Rye. But this book is set kind of during the 1940s, during World War II, and so Chinaski has a exemption, and it doesn't really go into detail. He just kind of talks with his father and said, "Hey, I had this classification where I was found unfit for service. It's not like I wasn't willing to serve, but I was found unfit." And we can kind of speculate that it may be maybe psychiatric type issues that was the reason they found him unfit.
Good possibility. Although there's a long list of things that the military could find you unfit based on.
Yeah, yeah. So after kicking around LA a little bit, he decides to save up some bread and go to New York. And so he is kind of doing some writing now. He talks about writing more than he did in Ham on Rye, I felt like. Do you think that's right?
Yeah, and Ham on Rye, he was really kind of aimless, just kind of floating by. He didn't have any direction really, whereas now he's actually interested in writing and trying to get some things published, uh, even though he may not take all the what you might consider the proper steps in that process, but he would like to make it happen though.
Yeah, and he is actively submitting things, right?
Right.
And
Lots of
this
short stories.
yeah, and sometimes doesn't even get a rejection slip, right?
It seems like the editor in charge of the publications is probably just throwing them in the garbage.
Yeah, yeah. Which Bukowski did draw from his own life, right? That is part of that semi autobiographical fiction that Bukowski is developing in Henry. Yeah, so he goes to New York, and just his travel process when he goes across the United States is interesting. Where he loads up on pints of whiskey. He knows that he's going to be unable to sleep. He's unable to use the bathroom other than to urinate in these public bathrooms and bus stops. And so he just rides and kind of gets drunk and, you know, is in discomfort, I'm sure, because 4 days across the country on a bus, I believe it said. Um, and what I found interesting, and we talked about a little bit, is there's no real description of the landscape in any of these times that he traverses the United
Could be a
States.
contrast to some of the other, what I would consider great authors that we've studied over the last few months that give great descriptions of the landscape as they travel back and forth across the country. Bukowski doesn't really give you much of that at all.
Yeah, yeah. It's not, almost that's not even something that he cares about.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Gets to New York. What do you got? Any comments on his New York experience?
Well, first thing that stands out is that after not mentioning the landscape at all, what he does notice and makes mention of is the people and all the noise. And he refers to them as being similar to insects. It gives you the feeling he doesn't like it. He's annoyed by the scenery as soon as he gets there.
Yeah, and one of those big motifs for Bukowski is dealing with this idea of social acceptance, and it's like you don't like people. Like I don't know that I'd want to be in Times Square,
Right.
because of this very thing that he's describing. You know what I mean? But he subjects himself to that, uh, and I was feeling like he was doing this almost for the experience to write something. Did you get that feel? That's why he's doing this traveling.
Yeah, it seemed like it. Like he even sought out hangouts from other successful authors at times, thinking he could go there and maybe gain inspiration as they did at times in their careers. But he just doesn't have the same type of success, and largely himself to blame for that, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. Right early on, we do see that trend of self sabotage in
Right.
Chinaski's life. And so he hangs around New York a little while until he does that, right? And moves on towards the Midwest. Um, there's some kind of interesting stopovers in Philadelphia and St. Louis. Um, the St. Louis one in particular, because of the females that are introduced, and anytime we're reading Bukowski, we're kind of watching him for how he's dealing with females, and is this just misogyny, or is there some deeper statement in this? And really gets his first chance or his only chance as a at a traditional wholesome relationship. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. Yeah, he actually met a nice girl who seemed genuinely interested in him, and he almost doesn't know how to handle it. I mean, he had a real chance to possibly be happy with this woman, but he didn't. Once again, self-sabotage. That's a pattern throughout this book and possibly most of his life, as far as that goes. Had a good thing going and just blew it through his bad attitude and social awkwardness.
Probably his
Uh, he,
alcoholism.
alcoholism is a huge part of that.
Yeah, yeah. And so he hangs around St. Louis until he just totally just tears it up with the girl and
Right. She
goes on
finds a
back to
better man.
L.A. Yeah,
She finds a better man, better suited for her, a more calm natured, respectable individual. And at that point, Henry realizes, well, I guess it's time to go then.
Yeah, yeah. And back in LA, there's a lot of different events and kind of scenes that go on that just continue that cycle. But kind of in this section, we're introduced to Jan, right? And Jan is a pretty big focal point of this book, right?
She definitely is. She is what you might consider the primary love interest, if you like, if you want to refer to her that way. They had a relationship for an extended period of time, be it good or bad. They spent a lot of time together,
Yeah, and it
living
was pretty
together.
pretty bad, right? For the
Yeah,
most
right,
part.
right. Yeah, what you might call codependent relationship. It was ugly. It was nasty. They stayed drunk. The alcoholism really was the bond that kept them together for the biggest part of it, and also the sexual relationship. Not something that he experienced very much of in the first book in the series, but uh, now that he's encountered this woman, it he may not really know how to handle it properly, and she's pretty much a wild character herself as far as that goes.
Yeah, and for his inexperience, she probably makes up for in her experience, right? She's
Right.
10 years his elder. It
Hmm.
mentions that she has two children, and then you never hear anything else about it.
Right. Through
Um,
all of their moving and escapades and fighting and drinking and all that, the kids are never mentioned again. Where are Jan's kids? We still don't know as far as that
right,
goes.
right. Not sure if Jan knows even. I would
Right.
venture to guess.
Yeah.
Um, we really see in that, like, because of that codependent relationship, we really start to see his alcoholism take over his life, where he is still writing some, but he is starting to black out, and him and Jan both are not only blacking out drunk, but doing it more often, right? And
So,
racking
so
up. Go ahead, go ahead.
right, right. Acquiring criminal charges left and right seems like, from petty misdemeanor things to some charges that sound a bit more serious. Uh,
Attempted rape. I mean, it
yeah,
said part of his rap sheet included attempted rape, and that if it's on his rap sheet, that's almost a conviction, I think, right? Yeah,
either way, even being charged with something like that, it's a stain on your reputation, whether you get convicted or not. It speaks
yeah,
to who he is as a person.
yeah. And so that's one of the big things that we see is his progression of his addiction, and we also kind of see him kind of a progression of how he deals with the labor market and finding these jobs. He starts out in this book really writing a lot and even kind of putting on some applications that he's writing, that he's a writer, trying to get a job as a reporter. And we really see a shift away from that as the book goes on. Um,
He applies for positions with magazines and newspapers to be a reporter, and instead they may hire him to be a janitor, which, according to his experience and his background, they felt like something he was more suited for,
yeah, yeah.
and probably because of his appearance.
Well, and just to think that the entry level position,
Yeah,
um, we see that self sabotage in a couple of those positions that he had, even one early on, uh, where it would have been a great job for a writer. Um,
right.
that he just kind of had to hang around and wait for a very rare customer to come in, and during that downtime, you could really do whatever you want. And instead of writing, he chose to go get drunk.
Right.
Right?
Anytime he could take a pint to work with him and drink during the shift, that's what he was going to do. If
Or
he
if
had
there's a
free time
bar
or
around
any
the corner,
lack of supervision, he's at the bar around the corner any chance he got.
yeah, 100%. So him and Jan carry on with this lifestyle of a strong appetite for alcohol and sex and violence, and eventually Henry just gets tired of it, and he has a little savings, and he takes his money and splits it with Jan, gives her his car that he bought, which was a clunker. I mean, this is a really POS car, you know.
Said he
Um,
gave $35 for it at the time.
yeah, and I
Be
don't know
more
what that
money.
is in
That'd be more money
inflation, but
today.
still, it what the car wasn't no count, right? They were going
Right.
over bumps, and the lights would go off, you know, and all those things. Um,
I've
we
probably
kind
seen
of
one or
talked about it. Ain't no
probably
telling
seen
how many
one or two
kids.
of those. You know.
Yeah, you know, they ain't no telling how many folks he might have ran over, you know.
Right. Right.
But anyways, he has her just take him to the bus station, right?
Hmm.
And they split. She's not necessarily happy about it, but by the time they get over there, uh, she's peeling off before he's out the car, right?
So
So it
on to her
travels.
next.
Go ahead.
On to her next man. On to find the next guy to help support her habit. More than likely, that's what the story would lead you to believe.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, this is the gal we kind of failed to mention during their whole um, time together. She was cheating on him and leaving out and having these engagements or entanglements, if you will, with gentlemen that maybe had more monetary resources and things like that. Um, so Chinaski heads for Miami. Um, Same old story on the ride over there, right? A
The whole way
very
on the bus.
uncomfortable uh, ride.
Yep.
Um, and it's like in Florida, in Miami, we felt like we saw a shift where he starts dealing with this labor market and kind of the bureaucracy and the absurdity of the system and all that more, right?
Starts going to state agencies to look for work rather than applying with private businesses on his own. I feel like he's getting a little more desperate just to support his habit more than anything else. He's not even concerned as much with his living situation as he is being able to continue fueling his alcoholism.
Yeah, and kind of finds the same situations in Miami that he's found everywhere else, right?
Right. But he could have a halfway decent job if he could just keep himself between the lines, show up and do what he's supposed to do. But that's just not who he was. He would
Right,
rather drink and misbehave, if you want to call it that, and
100%.
wind up ruining what could have been decent possibilities for him to have a career that would at least support him in his lifestyle.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like I think you said earlier, you called him a degenerate, and it's like, man, that's a really good way to describe it because it's like, bro, nobody cares if you want to be a drunk. You know, be a drunk. You know, but do it responsibly, right?
Same note, if you want to have your affairs with these wild women and all this, and you want to stay drunk, well, you have to fund that somehow. He's
Yeah.
never thinking about getting the money first and handling his business. It's always the his primary motivation should have been the secondary motivations after he handled his job and met his basic needs, but he had things a little backwards, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah, we I think anybody can say that for him.
Yeah,
But he does do for all the vulgarity and even you know we've said we may have referred to it as smut or close to that. Um, he does deal with some deeper social issues. You know, he kind of makes the comment when he's in Miami that the roles of the workers are kind of the same. Every factory that he sees is kind of the same. It's just a different minority that is represented uh, in that frontline worker, so to speak, right? So he hangs out in Miami till he gets fired for stealing, right? And he gets back on the bus headed for LA.
right.
Um, the first thing he does is he goes and looks for Jan, right?
It sounds like a horrible idea if you knew about their previous relationship and all the dealings they had together. Uh, doesn't make any sense for him to want to reconnect with her, and equally foolish of her to be willing to reconnect with him.
Yeah, yeah. Because it
Yet
ain't
when
a
he
great
does
thing, but
finally,
she.
go
Go
ahead. I'm
ahead.
sorry.
Well, I was gonna say, it sounds like she kind of got a decent little thing going for herself. She got her a little job that gets her
Right,
a little room, and can kind of, like you say, support her lifestyle if that's what she's going to do.
right,
Um, and yeah, it might not be a good idea to link back up with Henry, who's not a savory character. It's not like
right.
he's the victim in this.
No, definitely not. As you mentioned, with the criminal record and the charges that he picked up, you could tell he's not what you would consider a good guy.
Yeah, right. At all, at all.
Right.
Uh, And so their relationship continues on for a little while until this time she ends it, right?
Right.
And
I think it was kind of based on the fact that they kind of came to a dead end. Jobs lose jobs. They've got almost no money. It's they got no place to stay. So instead of trying to figure it out and make it work, then she basically finds another man who will gladly take her in and support her, and at least to an extent provide for her habits and that sort of thing. And Henry takes her to the building and drops her off and
drops her off.
watches her go inside with this guy.
Yeah, yeah.
That was their goodbye that time.
Hmm. And so we almost see from there, we see Bukowski create for Henry this pathway to Skid Row, right? And it's really at this point that we see what he's been setting up throughout the book when he was going to those kind of state ran agencies and finding unsuccess, but then getting a job in the private market. Now he is going to these different bureaus and agencies for different jobs, right?
Unskilled
Um,
labor for the most part.
right? But it's like each one is almost going down a peg, down
Hmm.
to the labor, the warehouse labor bureau,
Right.
and which was literally right next to Skid Row, right?
Right. So imagine the type of applicants that they had showing up there for those positions. And by this point, it seems like that was the group that Henry probably fit in with pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and right there at the end, it's really funny to me the interaction he has with the guy that's also sitting there waiting. And he's an older black dude, right? And it sets this guy up like that he's going to be some sage or have some deep philosophical insight because it says he knows something that nobody else knows.
He's really got some wisdom to drop on Henry.
Yeah, and then what is it?
Man, they just sat around and got drunk in the employment office there until they both get run out,
Right,
basically.
he had a bottle of wine or something. That's what he
Yeah,
knew. He had a
right,
drink. Yeah.
right. We can sit right here and drink basically while we wait for our turn to be called. They finish that bottle. Henry goes down the street, gets another bottle, and comes back. I don't think that has ever been the key to getting hired somewhere.
No, no, no. And yeah, like you say, eventually they get kicked out of that place, right?
Right.
And so they're just kind of kicking it around, I guess, Skid Row, finishing off
Hmm.
that last bottle until they split. Um,
Right.
and there's kind of that good line of that Bukowski wrote that Henry's wandering the wasteland of downtown LA, um, and kind of wanders into a strip joint, right?
With 38 cents to his name and no place to live, no way to feed himself, he decided that the strip joint was the best place he could spend the rest of the day.
Yeah. Obviously, just slouched, right? He is.
The
Drunk as a
self-sabotage,
skunk.
the self-sabotage has progressed into self-destruction at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah,
He
and
sees
kind of
Skid
see
Row in
that
his
in that
future.
closing. Say again.
He sees Skid Row in his future, like it's an imminent thing that's going to happen, and he's not really doing anything to keep it from happening. He's moving closer and closer towards that, almost as if that's something he just accepted. It's just bound to be his future.
Forlorn conclusion. Yeah. And we even see that in the closing scene where during the show at this gentleman's club. I don't even know if it's a gentleman's club like we consider it. This is really, I think, what the idea that I have of a gentleman's club may be something of Southern culture, right? That maybe it's probably not the same that maybe was going on in L.A. or maybe New York. You know what I mean? Um, but either way, with Chinaski and this self sabotage and this being just overwhelmed by the addiction, we see that even in his physical form, right? You know, he is enticed by the show, but has no physical reaction, and we almost know it's because of the alcohol, right? It's that has just taken over his life. Um, and we close on that. Bukowski ends it right there. Mm.
Kind of a funny way to end it as far as that goes, but it puts an exclamation point basically too on the destruction he's doing to himself with the
Yeah.
alcohol abuse and the lifestyle he's chosen to live for years at that point in time. Been on this same cycle.
Yeah. And so when we're looking at Bukowski, as far as what we've looked at him together, and I've not read much more than that. I've read Post Office as well. But that's almost the saving grace for me. You know, I do stand by Bukowski as an artist, and for any artist to want to push the boundaries when it comes to freedom of expression and push the boundaries of censorship and things like that. Um, but for me, much like Chinaski's critique of Henry Miller in the book, Bukowski is kind of great in his
He's good.
moments.
He's great. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a lot of crap in between.
Right. Those
Um,
moments are few and far between.
yeah, yeah. And I don't know that beyond that surface level of pushing the envelope, um, that I prefer him maybe over others, I guess I might say.
Right. Yeah. You would have to have an appreciation for his art and the way he's dealing with censorship and pushing back against the norms of writing in that time period to really be able to appreciate this book, in my opinion. If you read it at face value just for the story, it may not be your favorite.
Yeah, yeah. Would you did you think would you say that you preferred Ham on Rye as far as the story and the flow of that?
I did prefer him on Rye as far as the story because there was a lot more what I would consider interesting details. You know, you can read that and say, man, this kid had a tough but interesting life growing up. Whereas in Factotum, it's just a consistent pattern of the self-destruction, the self-sabotage with the drinking, the alcoholism is just repeated over and over. So you don't get as many interesting situations and details, and at least not the same type
Yeah.
as you did in Ham on Rye.
Yeah, I certainly felt that redundancy, and then even some of those extreme scenes did not hold as much maybe artistic integrity as some of the other that we found in Ham on Rye. But he still is dealing with that idea of the another class, like an alternative lifestyle, right?
Right.
And
He's he's a beat, a LA beat.
yeah, 100%, 100% in a lot of ways. A lot of ways he is.
Right.
Um, and that's cool to kind of sit and make that comparison as well. Oh.
Right.
So would you suggest Factotum in the same way that you would suggest Ham on Rye?
I wouldn't suggest it in the same way as Ham on Rye because I think Ham on Rye held a little bit more entertainment value for the reader. But if the art that the author is sharing and the deeper meaning is something that you could find yourself interested in, then it's worth a read.
100%, 100%. Well, that's cool. So let's just talk a little bit on what our plans are for the future. We're gonna do this again, aren't we?
Yeah, I'd like to.
100%. And just to let the people in on kind of what we're doing in this book club, we've kind of decided to take a little break from Bukowski.
Yeah, yeah, we're gonna give Bukowski a rest and maybe switch up to somebody that I think other people will appreciate a bit more than the art that Bukowski has been producing.
Yeah, well, let them go ahead,
As
and
far
let
as
them
what we
on.
have shared.
Yeah, let them know what we're planning on doing next.
So we're gonna focus on John Steinbeck's The Pearl is the next thing up on our agenda as far as reviewing and making a video to share with you guys. And I'll tell you now, the artistry is much different. There are levels to this. Like there's levels to everything. And I appreciate Bukowski. I think that we agreed on that. I try to appreciate all the authors for their artwork, and for sharing that with the world. But the writing, man, sometimes you read something and you say, this really touches me more, or I can see this more. It makes you really feel something. And that's the difference that I get personally between John Steinbeck and Charles Bukowski. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful towards Bukowski, but that's how I feel about it.
100%. I'm with that too. And yeah, and I look forward to the Pearl. The Pearl is a great little. I don't know if you would call that a novella or a short story, but it is definitely a shorter work. And I look forward to doing that. Well, brother, I really appreciate you, man. This is such a blessing for me. I'm gonna go ahead and sign off of here. This has been Maxwell 3000 Productions. I am Maxwell 3000. I'm with Tommy Dixon, Dixon Fence Company, 423-999-1390. Peace and love.